Okay, so the origin story of PyreSwap goes back to an exploit in 2022 for another DEX known as Redemption. And I believe that was in April of 2022. This exploit involved about $1 million of TVL somehow getting burned through a flash loan attack, with a bad actor making off with about $100,000 of token, which he or she then dumped on the open exchange, I believe SpookySwap. And this had to do with, I believe, an oracle being delayed, and on top of the fact that the way that the burning was being done inside the factory contract, let's just say that it left, I guess, some room for improvement. But what happened after the fact is that people lost a lot of faith. Yeah, people lost a lot of faith in a project known as 2-ohm and 3-ohm. And I remember that I jumped onto a Discord stage channel like pretty much while the exploit was happening, because I couldn't get in touch with the main team of 2-ohm and 3-ohm at the time. And I ended up with like an audience of like 250 people. Like, so many people were pouring in to listening to me talk about this, and I literally almost had no information at the time. I was really just kind of like providing this lip service, this type of, public affairs type of language, being the publicist. Indeed, it was a long story ago. Being the publicist of this gigantic problem. And what happened afterwards is that people slowly but surely lost faith in the team behind those projects. It happened over a few months. And I want to say that I began focusing on doing stuff for the Seniorid Circus because we were actually in the middle of acquisitions of Frozen Tomb and Snow Tomb a few weeks later. And that kind of began the shifting of my day-to-day. Now, a few weeks after that, I kept talking about what I was going to do internally to the Seniorid Circus about Frozen Tomb and Snow Tomb, when on one peculiar day in July, I was approached 4 times in one day. I was approached 4 times in one day by 4 different people, and basically they were asking if we could step in and do something about 2-ohm, 3-ohm, and arguably Redemption, because it seemed like the organization behind those projects completely lost steam, or at least they were in a rut of some kind. I'm assuming a lot of you watching this video probably remember this, but it was a single day, 4 people came to me and they mentioned it. It's like, hey, do you know what's going on with this? And to be honest, while we were running a campaign for this in the circus, I effectively, was telling the team at that point, I was telling them that the real thing they needed to do to fix these was something called terminal utility. Now, terminal utility is a story for another video, but effectively speaking, it became apparent that nobody over there had any real plan to do this, and I believe some of the messaging, the public-facing announcements kind of alluded towards relaunching the projects as opposed to fixing them. And that honestly wasn't that surprising because nobody was really talking about how to fix them besides me. So what happened was a bunch of people came to me and insisted that I should step up and take responsibility. And so I chose to. Originally, we were going to begin investigating whether or not they would be open to acquisition by speaking with, I don't think I'm going to drop names on this story, but I was going to speak with other members of the team known as Matrix Money, and inquire about whether acquisition was even a conversation. Later on, in September, I just approached the leader of Matrix Money himself, and I began negotiations because I think me waiting a little bit longer to kind of investigate paid off for us, because it only made things more dismal on their end. And I know that sounds a bit predatory, but I feel like had I approached sooner, it would have been more difficult to do. I don't think it would have been possible for me to have done it sooner. I believe I needed the wind to kind of collapse beneath the wings of all the people who thought that there was going to be a comeback under the original management. So as we're acquiring 2Ohm and 3Ohm, I get informed that Z-Ohm is also part of the deal, but redemption is not. So redemption was originally what PyreSwap was meant to be, was the way we were going to rebuild redemption had we acquired it as part of the deal. We were told we were not acquiring redemption, which wasn't really a deal breaker because almost nothing had been done there. It was really just a fork of a DEX at the time. And I think none of its proprietariness really mattered because I wasn't trying to adopt any of that. I was trying to effectively completely revise what they were trying to do. Not to preach about terminal utility for too long, but one of the easiest ways to implement terminal utility is to actually make the peg coin usable in a DEX environment. And I watched a lot of tomb forks launch a DEX as a side project and yet fail to recognize this, which again blew my mind because to me it was like, I don't know, elementary school information. But I'm not here to talk about how great I am. So we ended up acquiring 2Ohm and 3Ohm and Z-Ohm over about a 60-day period. It started at September 26th, and I think it concluded like November 26th or something like this. And it took 2 months to do like a real satisfactory transfer of all the assets and an audit to make sure that we had everything. Now, believe it or not, a lot of the stuff concerning the Matrix Money team was alleging to certain mismanagement, to certain negligence, and possibly even criminality, which I was trying to remain agnostic about. Does that make sense? A lot of people accused Matrix Money of possibly being behind the original redemption exploit, and to this day that I don't really believe they were, but I also cannot rule it out. What I do know for a fact is that during the acquisition of 2Ohm, 3Ohm, and Z-Ohm, the operator of 3Ohm was minting millions of 3Ohm behind the scenes and then dumping it on the liquidity providers for redemption. So if you go back to 2022, between September and November, you will see this event where slowly, shortly after, I think some of the 2Ohm and Z-Ohm contracts were transferred over to the Señor Circus custodial wallet, which if you want to know which wallet that is, you can look it up in the PyreSwap documentation. You will see that around that time, 3Ohm was getting minted into the millions, and it was just getting dumped and dumped and dumped onto the 3Ohm liquidity providers. I believe another few $1,000s was squeezed out of the 3Ohm investors this way. And I effectively smiled through my teeth because I didn't really feel like I was the one getting exploited. I felt like this was something that I was watching Matrix Money do to their own investors. I didn't really have a problem with it either way because if my solution, which was terminal utility, was going to work to fix this project, it was going to work whether or not 3Ohm had 5 million total supply or whether it had 15 million. Does that make sense? Later on, Z-Ohm actually had an overprinting conundrum as well. That one more accidental, but I also, chose to not lose a wink of sleep about it because, to be honest, the only future Z-Ohm was ever going to have was in terminal utility. Because, to be honest, before it was offered to me, I kind of completely forgot Z-Ohm existed. I'm not going to lie about that. I think I remember hearing about it once and then never again. So, we acquired Z-Ohm, and originally my plan was to take Frozen Tomb and Snow Tomb on Avalanche, and then take 2Ohm and 3Ohm, and these are going to be the 4 projects that kind of plug into the GPSC. So learning that there was now a 3rd project on Phantom kind of implied that there needed to be a 3rd project on Avalanche. And picking from the list of projects the Señor Circus partnered with and campaigned on in 2022, around this time, Ice Cream Finance, which was one of our campaign projects, it was abandoned by its devs, and those devs also apparently rug pulled their nodes and their auto compounder. So we basically chose to design a version 2 resurrection of Ice Cream Finance known as Affogato Finance, and then that became the proverbial 6th project inside the greater PyreSwap ecosystem. Now, around the time that I was wrapping up the acquisition of 2Ohm, 3Ohm, and Zohm, so in November, I was actually approached by the dev of Dibs. And he was basically trying to become acquired because he was in he was no longer able to, I guess, spend the time that he felt his project really needed. And he sincerely felt bad about leaving the project in its current state. So I began telling him about the PyreSwap and the greater PyreSwap ecosystem way earlier than I told everybody else. And he immediately saw the vision and how it worked. And, he agreed to the acquisition. And now we had effectively 3 projects on Phantom, 2 on Avalanche, and now 1 on Binance, right? 1 on BNB Smart Chain. So what basically became required is that we were going to need 3 projects in all 3 chains. Like, that was the only way I felt that it was going to be a balanced ecosystem. And if you read the documentation of PyreSwap, you now at least understand where the 9 tokens come from that end up getting plugged into the meeting utility of PyreSwap. So that is just 2022. Goodness gracious. So in November of 2022, I did a presentation that was about 6 hours long. It was internal to the Senior Circus troupe, and it was the troupe debut of PyreSwap. And it was a much more primitive, much more rudimentary version of PyreSwap. It was not nearly at the level of design that it is today. It was much less impressive as well, to be honest. And I think that I think 3 or 4 things we got wrong. But by the time that we were actually, getting PyreSwap deployed on actual chains, it had evolved to, 5 phases, if not 6 phases. And I think that the extra time we spent in development was worthwhile because we were able to have more internal meetings, do more internal communication, get things clearer, and we were all able to kind of, I think, improve a lot in our own skill sets. And I think that makes all the difference. We were able to self-improve as a team and as an organization. And I definitely had to learn skills that I didn't have. I had to teach myself how to model UML. I had to teach myself software project management, which is not something that I rolled into DeFi with. And so we acquired Dibs. We already had that. And starting in December, I want to say December 16th or 19th, I think, we did the first. Thank you. We did the first Revelation tour. We announced it like, hey, by the way, we have now acquired these 5 projects. Oh, by the way, we also acquired, quote unquote, the Phithe Finance Discord server. That was actually, through Wake Sessions. Shout out to Wake Sessions. And effectively speaking, I realized that this could be this missing component because Phithe Finance was also a tomb fork that effectively got abandoned post an exploit. And originally, I realized we did not have room for Phithe Finance on Avalanche, but coincidentally, Phithe Finance was bridgeable over to BNB Smart Chain because of the fact that the same dev team was launching a DEX on BNB Smart Chain known as, I believe, Orbital Swap, which was a DEX that was designed to kind of be paired with a Titano fork. Again, this was, in my mind, a complete blind spot of where terminal utility could have been implemented, but it wasn't. And one thing led to another, and Wake Sessions actually came to me personally, and he said, I know you know how to fix these. Like, can you please think of some sort of future scenario for the investors of Phithe? And I don't know if I can think of anybody who was more persistent with me than Wake Sessions. And like, I couldn't say no to Wake Sessions because I'm like, you know what? Absolutely. And I basically had to start telling Wake Sessions about the ways that I could fix it early. And effectively, this became like the centerpiece. So this is, in fact, PyreSwap's social media is in fact the old Piggy Finance social media, because it was kind of like the perfect fit. And of course, yeah, absolutely. And of course, Piggy Finance, specifically the original tokens of Piggy Finance, they do get resurrected and implemented into the GPSC as well. So, and of course, Ribs, if you guys are familiar with Ribs, Hoggy Finance is the resurrected version, or should I say reanimated version of Piggy, and Ribs is actually the very creative solution we came up with so we could also fix the US DIBS token. And more on that later. Like if you guys are watching this video and know what I mean, let's say it's a little bit beyond the scope of the PyreSwap origin story. So we basically, I made a modified version of the presentation of the truth debut of PyreSwap, and it became the Revelation Tour. It was actually a little bit better than the truth debut because I had about another few weeks to work on it. And effectively speaking, I think I presented this to probably about 200 to 300 people in Discord total over 5 days. I picked a different time slot so I could get like a large variety of audience members. I think the 5th day was recorded, and I think that I really did organically well with the Revelation Tour as a presentation, because I think a lot of people saw that I was thinking about this at a level of granularity and detail, and actually discussing the stuff that goes wrong with financial instruments and tokens and stuff that I don't think that they were used to hearing from other Web3 devs. It still blows my mind that well, let's just leave it at that. It still blows my mind. During Revelation Tour, we were taking over the contract control of a lot of these projects that we had just got done acquiring. And Zeom, which was in fact a very small project, Zeom actually repegged over the hype. So while Zeom repegged, something we hadn't fixed was the oracle of the Zeom boardroom. So when Zeom repegged, it was actually several hundred epochs behind schedule, and it was expanding at a rate of 6% daily. So people were able to hyperprint Zeom by accident, and its supply expanded to something like 150 million. Now, this was done completely accidentally, and I do take full responsibility for it happening. However, this really kind of solidified that we were going to change the pegs of a lot of these projects if we had the ability to, because I felt that if we were going to have 3 of each tomb fork plugged into PyreSwap per chain, something we could at least do is also create some differences between the 3. I felt that it would be too boring if they were just complete clones of each other, so we could at least create some sort of superficial small changes that fundamentally they're the same machine, but maybe they have different quirks, for lack of a better way to describe it. And I want to say on day 3, right before the Revelation Tour on the Phantom chain, we effectively we set the operator for the Zeom boardroom to the treasury, which is in fact the one that allows everybody to allocate seigniorage. Yeah, Enter Garage, I'll tell you this. Yeah, I think that was serendipitous, and also it makes PyreSwap that much more impressive that we have 3 chains and we have 3 peg coins per chain. And I think that really kind of elevated the beauty of the project's design, because you got to keep in mind, I can literally show you images where I was just talking about 4 peg coins going into PyreSwap. It was meant to be a much smaller project. You know what I mean? But I don't think that it was my choice. I think that, I don't know if you want to call it destiny. One thing led to another, and PyreSwap has turned out better than it was ever imagined. And by the way, the original name was Fuego Swap, which everybody hated. Do you guys know what I mean? When it turned into a GameFi project, I was not trying to rip off Redemption. Do you know what I mean? Like, Redemption kind of had its own like fantasy fiction stuff going too, but like more anime. I was not trying to like, rip that off. Like that was just kind of how it was steered. And I think I explained that in the past. But yeah, no, the fact that we have three tokens on 3 different chains for a total of 9 that all plug in to PyreSwap so serendipitously, I think that really kind of like that speaks volumes to the uniqueness of the project. So on day 3 of the Revelation Tour, this is December of 2022. So this was maybe December 21st or 22nd, maybe the 19th. I don't know which day it was exactly. Effectively speaking, right before the Revelation Tour was presented to the Phantom audience, we reverted the control of the boardroom to the public. And immediately it was printed. It was printed like Zimbabwe times Venezuela times Argentina. That's the only way I can describe it. It was printed to a total supply of 150 million. This is at least a 15x in its total supply, if not like a 30x or a 50x. It might have honestly been a 50x of its total supply, and I chose to basically present the entire Revelation Tour and let this happen for about 45 minutes. So like I was expecting that like eventually it would stop happening because one, I wasn't really scared of running into an overprint scenario, because if PyreSwap was going to work, it was going to work at any total supply. Does that make sense? Like even if Zeom got printed to 150 million and we kept its peg at 1 Phantom, it would still need to work. Does that make sense? Like it would still need to work somehow, and it arguably would have. Like I can in theory prove that, but I guess nobody cares anymore. But it did allow me to justify changing its peg to 0.01 Phantom as well, because when the total supply increases by that much, I kind of didn't feel bad about it, because that project would have never came back from the dead had we not adopted it. So even if some people got a bizarre surprise, I don't feel bad about changing the peg, because most of the Z-Share stakers made money from me making that mistake. So I don't feel bad about doing it, because I feel like everybody got adequately paid for it. So I completed the Revelation Tour, and at the time, the lead dev in the Senor Circus was a guy named Lest, and Lest hadn't really seen the entirety of what I designed for PyreSwap. So he gave me a timeline that it was going to take about 90 days starting in January. It was going to take about 90 days to build the Professor Phithe's Elastic Supply dashboard, which was again a dashboard that I insisted we place literally everywhere that we have an Elastic Supply tokenomic interface. And after that, he estimated it would only take about a month for the DEX itself. Does that make sense? Now, Lest is primarily a front-end guy, and he's actually a front-end phenom. He's probably one of the best front-end devs I've ever met in my life. It was unfortunate that during 2023, Lest's professional career, I guess, took a turn, and then it took another turn, and then it took another turn, and effectively Lest had to step down from the project sometime in the middle of 2023. This was pretty crippling, because there was no real clear succession. It was more like I was effectively getting past the job that I knew nothing about. As soon as the Elastic Supply dashboard was getting deployed and we were starting to announce it and reveal it, I realized that I now needed to actually spend time on building the design documents for PyreSwap itself. Now, there was no way I could have predicted this, but the design documents for phase 1 of PyreSwap is a 73-page document. Granted, it has a lot of diagrams, but it is a 73-page document. So if you guys think that the short version of the docs are long, know that the blueprint of PyreSwap, just phase 1, is 73 pages. On top of that, it took me about 300 hours to produce it. So this was about, I don't know, a month or two of me doing nothing but sleeping on the floor of this very office and then waking up for spurts of building this gigantic PDF. And by the time that I was getting it done, I was showing it to the other devs, and I believe some of the devs were in fact getting scared out of their mind. Some of the earlier devs, I think, might have in fact been nauseated by the amount of detail that we had in these documents. I don't think that they'd ever seen anything in Web3 at that level of detail. Now, most of the stuff was actually just repetition in the design documents. I mean, I think Chiadezo was here in the audience, and he's seen these documents probably a bunch. Believe it or not, the devs that we finished this job with, they all have less than 3 years of experience, which I know is probably a little bit concerning. But I was listening to an interview by Mark Zuckerberg, and he was saying that like he was able to build more things faster with guys who weren't traditional computer programmers because they didn't get limited by the same type of cultural or industry-based biasing. So we actually worked this out with 3 devs on 3 different continents, and I believe none of them had more than 3 years of experience in programming. And I think it was because I also had 0 years of experience as a software project manager and a software architect. I maybe had 1 year, right? But I think it was from the fact that we didn't have the limiting beliefs that came from a lengthy career that we were able actually to pull it off. Now, granted, this definitely had its downsides, and one of these downsides was the fact that this took way longer than it was projected. If we had the experience base that we started this project with, I believe that we could have been where we are now in about 6 months' time. So we would have been here prior to the end of June 2023, something like that. But it is now, as I'm recording this video, May of 2024. So I want to say what took 16 months was originally promised in about 4 months. But I think it was worth it fighting for this as long as it was, because it allowed PyreSwap to kind of evolve behind the scenes. And I know that that's not visible yet, but I think it'll be visible to everybody soon. So as we're replacing like 3/4 of the dev team, because effectively people were, I think the market, the crypto market itself, was getting more and more sad in 2023. Does that make sense to you guys? I believe that, Q3 and Q4 of 2022, the American economy was already declared to be in a recession. Whether people believe that or not, in my opinion, it was as early as April of 2022. And crypto was continuing to feel the sadness throughout 2023. And I think a few of you guys that I'm talking to today, you guys might remember that, perhaps. Perhaps you guys remember what the middle of 2023 felt like. I think this perhaps demotivated a lot of people. And inside the Senior Circus, we had a lot of people just showing up a little bit less and a little bit less. Like it was just harder and harder for them to, I think, feel good things about Web3. And if it wasn't for my motivation to finish this project, not based on the fact that, everybody could make a lot of money, but rather that like I could actually pick up thousands of people out of the gutter and like brush them off and put them back on their feet, like I don't think that I would have had the motivation either. But my motivation to complete this wasn't just the financial upside. Yeah, it was more about like, I now knew that there was 15,000 unique wallets. Again, yeah, there was 15,000 unique wallets in the GPSE before the GPSE was even built. And even if we assume that maybe there's 3 wallets per person, and I don't think it's even that high. I think it's closer to like maybe 1 and a decimal, maybe 1.5 per person. I knew that there was 15,000 investors that I could rescue. Like I could go be a fucking hero There's at least 10,000 in my opinion. Appreciate that. And I felt that was more valuable than the financial upside. Like, do you guys get what I'm saying? Like, if you can rescue 10,000 investors from bankruptcy, I think that's worth more than whatever amount of money that I stood to make from this. Because I'm counting souls. Do you guys get what I'm saying? I'm not counting shillings. Right? Do you guys get what I'm saying? I've done the simulations on how much I stand to make, and I've done like high end and low end, and I still don't think about that. Like, I don't drool over that as much as I still think about the fact that I can really just turn a gigantic disaster around. It's like I can unsink the Titanic. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like, I think that being able to unsink the Titanic is way more impressive than being able to claim the insurance check, if you guys get what I'm saying. So during the summer of 2023, I did another presentation called Touching Base and Showing Face. And right here, I don't know if it was recorded, but you can tell from my writing that I'm at like the maximum level of stress here. I appreciate you saying that a lot. I look back at some of the old PDFs that I was writing, and I can see like where my heart is at and where my head is at. And I can see that like the communities are going through it and everybody's investments are going through it. And me personally, I was going through it too. I had previously pre-sold an economics and tokenomics course to my communities. I had sold enough of them where I really felt like I needed to deliver. And I was no longer going to be able to find the time to work on that course because I had to now step into the project management role of PyreSwap. And I didn't want to like say this to the investor base. I didn't want to say, hey, by the way, like we just lost like the power player because he no longer has the time to do this. He just moved to a different country or whatever happened. And all I wanted to like let people know is that like I'm not ever going to quit, you know. And I wrote that in the docs. Like, I'm never going to quit. I was writing that to the user base, but I was writing it to myself as well because like I'm not going to quit. Like, I will die before I quit. And I knew that in the Web3 space, something that I found most prevalent about other project founders or project leaders is that they just didn't have tenacity. They just talked a good game, but like when winter came, they just tapped out. Like, they just did not know how to solve problems. They did not know how to like really face adversity. And I felt that they were children. I don't want to sound elitist, but I felt that was unacceptable behavior for adult men. Does that make sense? Like, I believe, yeah, exactly. And the thing is, Wake, I was literally willing to like give these ideas away. In fact, I had given so many ideas away, but I don't think people valued my ideas because I was giving them away for free. Does that make sense? Like, I kept thinking that they felt that my expertise and their expertise were like somewhat similar, and the amount of rage that built up in me in 2022, it became apparent to me that I was like 99 levels above everybody I was talking to, and this was making me feel like I was going crazy because either I knew exactly what I was talking about or I was crazy. Like, there was no in between. Like, I was either a crazy person, perhaps living under a bridge, you know, insisting they know something about the future, or I was a miracle worker as far as DeFi is concerned. And I didn't feel good about labeling myself as either of these because it was anxiety inducing that I was a crazy person, and it was also anxiety inducing that I apparently had a superpower that nobody else in Web3 had, which didn't make sense to me because this is a space where everybody thinks about cryptocurrency, and it blew my mind that nobody knew what currency was. But I'm not going to get into that on this video. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, and like, you know, I could have easily, like, you know, Garage, I ran out of, I lost some critical teammates. I guess I'm not going to be able to do it. Something I noticed is that whenever these projects have problems, everybody just passes the buck to another person on their team. Does that make sense? Like, they don't have like a clear organization, and they don't have like a clear, they don't have a responsibility structure. Meaning, when something goes wrong, like, who's responsible for coming up with a solution? This is really basic stuff. So, like, when I saw this happening left and right in Web3, I realized, again, I just kept coming more and more to the conclusion that these were grown men that weren't men at all. They were just children. And I know that I don't want to, like, continue sounding like I'm arrogant, but, like, I really wanted to choke the life out of them. There's actually a recording of me being interviewed by Yabonks, and I think I went on for like 7 minutes about choking people with piano wire. And I just felt so much rage that there was just dozens and dozens and dozens of these guys on the internet pseudonymously posing as if they're large and in charge, but like you could just blow on them and they would fall over. Because I've now had like what 6 tomb forks abandoned, right? Nuzzling at my bosom, and I've not declared that I'm out of this once. Where you've now seen people quit on multiple forks, or people quit multiple projects, launch a new one, and like the way that they make decisions makes me think that they must be on some level fucktarded. Have I used that word before in the past? Like, it really made me question their non-fucktardedness. It was hard to consider that they are not fucktarded. And possibly permanently and irrevocably fucktarded. I'm just glad I was able to say fucktarded 4 times on the official PyreSwap origin story. Anyways, so in the middle of 2023, I want to say June, I was doing this second presentation, and I can read back and look at it, and I'm like, wow, I was fucking furious. Like, I was mad at my devs, I was mad at my user base, maybe I was mad at myself, I was mad at the market, and or we can double it, Manny, to 8x. And I was just like literally only pushing myself forward from just sheer rage. Does that make sense? Like, I was just absolutely unwilling to take quitting or like failure or like anything other than knocking it out of the park as the outcome of this scenario. Does that make sense to you guys? So it was actually like in July of 2023. In July of 2023, it was almost like PyreSwap was starting over with a new team. Not a completely new team, but the majority of the team was effectively new, and I was now doing these weekly meetings, and possibly multiple weekly meetings sometimes, and we were doing this with volunteer devs of significantly lower experience and skill set than who we started with. Like, the odds were now only higher, the odds were now even lower. Does that make sense? It's like going bird watching and then suddenly you lose one of your eyes. Does that make sense? It was literally like we got handicapped, like we got really crippled by the summer of 2023. But like, I was not willing under any circumstance other than my own death, because dismemberment would not have stopped me. Because honestly, as far as like, running a project off of Discord, you can do it without appendages, right? You can just get one of those, you can do it blind. You can do it without, well, I'm not going to push my luck, okay? In October, we were continuing to get closer and closer to a timeline where I was now beginning to get into the hang of being a project manager, because I now had a few months of doing it. And in October, that was like the first time I believed that we could have real deployments of PyreSwap's contracts. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, I want to say October of 2023, I was now able to see PyreSwap. Does that make sense? It was no longer just an idea in my head. It was like something that was actually taking taking is something that was happening. We were building it on testnet at the time, and I'm gonna be honest. It's not just me. Devs in general are really bad at guessing timelines, and I think that a lot of the timelines that I've told to my user base publicly have been like derivative timelines of deadlines that other devs have given me. Hey Kiedezo, how are you? I have a dev meeting twice a week, and I think up to 6 times a week I'm being told a timeline that's not being hit. Let's put it that way. But guess what? Like, I think that's just how you do it. Like, that's just how you do it. You just keep kind of pushing for a deadline, and then like those deadlines get missed, and then you just kind of renegotiate the deadline. Yeah, grow a grid. Well, for us, it's been about 4x. So for us, it's 4 months to 16 months. The Genesis hit list was supposed to take 2 weeks. It took 2 months, right? 2 weeks to 8 weeks. So we have about a 4x on our timeline estimations. But at least now we know the number. But yeah, we're just not going to quit. In October, I think we started becoming more and more active back in the Discords. I ended up having to stop doing a lot of my public appearances, and I started making more and more of them. And in November, I think people started building up. The hype was really starting to build. I think that people really started to see like, wow, this is actually going to, come out of the garage. In December, we were able to, indeed, yeah, elastic timelines for sure. A lot of elasticity in this theme. In December, we had, I guess, what you could consider our false start, because what we were able to do is we were able to deploy the meeting utility at the end of December, and I think that my excitement just to have it deployed was manifesting it as speculative investor excitement on the price charts. I'm like, listen guys, I want you guys to practice with $5, okay? Okay, yeah, that's I see the peanut gallery is being very creative today, but I just wanted to. I really was so excited that like something that I had invented was real now. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like this was something that I had invented in like Q3 and Q4 of 2022, and I was like foaming at the mouth of excitement that something that I had built a blueprint for had now been built, and I was like losing my mind with excitement, which was again infecting all of the user base. And I think that the user base felt that they were going to be able to throw their entire life savings into the meeting utility when it first got deployed. Well, you know what? I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, because I was now officially an inventor, right? Does that make sense? This was a big life achievement for me. And the fact of the matter is that this was not a launch as much as it was a beta test. I'm like, hey guys, I really appreciate you guys are excited, but I would really feel better about your bag and my reputation if everybody was testing with $5. Remember, you guys, who here remembers me saying $5 like 1,000 times? Thank you. Anyways, so that was a bit, I think, counterintuitive to the standard Web3 community member who would prefer to go max out a $5,000 credit card or take their child's college money and just YOLO it at the first thing that they think is a winner. Does that make sense? And in December, we saw a lot of price chart action that effectively was, I think they felt a little bit like their expectations weren't met, because the thing that I was excited about was that we had effectively built new things. We had basically invented the first intentional terminal utility. And I guess that's not true, because coins like AVAX get burned in gas and stuff like that. But we had it was my first terminal utility. Does that make sense? It was the first one designed by Phithe, and that was huge for me. And I was again foaming at the mouth with excitement, but we were not ready yet to 100x everybody's bags effectively. And I think that, that was a bit, let's just say that was a bit of a miscommunication. But effectively speaking, when we were finally able to get the complete terminal utility ecosystem deployed in February, I was still able to prove to myself that what I had designed almost 2 years prior to that was now functional. Like my heart was singing. But I guess some of the stuff that I failed to plan for was rearing its ugly head. And the first of these gigantic hurdles was that platforms like DexScreener had changed their business model. And their business model was now being much more friendly to projects like meme tokens. And on top of that, pretty much all of the Web3 user base was now hyper fixated on meme tokens, because meme tokens were these things that, even though I would say probably less than 1 in 1,000 seems to do anything impressive, people kept lying to themselves and thinking that they were going to hunt that one out. And while I've literally never seen a meme token kind of truly dissect the reason it's going to value, it's going to increase in value, like I did for PyreSwap and the GPSE, I realized that I had somehow sabotaged my own ability to spread my message to a large of an audience, as I was able to, going back to 2022. In 2022, I could write an announcement and it would move a price chart. I'm not even going to say that with any shame. Thankfully, these were mostly micro caps or even nano caps, but I could write an announcement and it would move a price chart. And at this point, I realized that people had just kind of moved on. And this was part of the cost of the fact that we were junior and we were perhaps not able to produce as fast as we could have with a deeper talent pool. Now, the good news is that I kind of, something that I use in my own approach to solving problems is, if I'm going to solve a problem, let me see if I can solve it with style. You're completely correct there. And I couldn't agree more. And I'm not going to comment on that. But going back to what I was saying about solving problems with style, solving problems with a little bit of flex, I think that if I am going to prove that I can win a fight, I'm going to train for that fight with one arm tied behind my back. Does that make sense? And I am, of course, speaking very metaphorically. But if I'm going to solve a problem, I'm going to prove that I'm going to solve the fuck out of that problem. Does that make sense to you guys? And basically what I said was, hey guys, we're not going to have any farms, no Genesis, no marketing, right? No Genesis, no marketing, right? You guys remember me saying this. We won't need it. Don't worry. We've already got 15,000 unique wallets, and we've got over 9,000 members of our Discord community, right? What I didn't realize is that most people who use Discord, they're in like 75 servers, but they only really visit or follow up with maybe like 3 to 6. Does that make sense? To do project management, I was no longer able to engage with the community. It was effectively, I had to focus internally, and I think it really put a lot of stress on my user base because they were used to getting regular communication from me. And I was now being forced to learn a new skill and focus all my time on it. And I had to make the choice that, my investors had to effectively have faith in me based on me saying that I wasn't going to quit during the June presentation. And that was the best I could feed them, because I had to basically learn how to do a job that I had no background in and also do it well. Anyways, it wasn't that Kidazo, thank you so much. And I believe that you did great as well. It wasn't so much that doing marketing was illegal or doing Genesis was illegal. I just wanted to prove for my own ego that I could solve this without, I guess you could say, resorting to marketing. Because I felt that one of the advantages of having all of these wallets in the GPSE was that all I needed to do was move the price chart, 3x, and then all the investors would come rushing back in. Does that make sense? Hilariously, during meme coin season, 3x was not big enough for a lot of investors to notice. Additionally, a lot of the dashboard websites, they were beginning to cater to meme tokens, and therefore the tokens that we held ownership and operator privileges for, they were no longer appearing in any sort of trending lists or in top gainers or in top losers. And I realized that we had effectively become starved for eyeballs due to the majority of the industry shifting towards what I consider are trash projects. And I want you guys to understand something. 3 will not be a revolution of finance if all we're inventing is scammy meme tokens where 999 out of 1,000 collapse on their face within the first week. Does that make sense? Like, this is supposed to be an economic revolution that changes the world, and mostly people have invented new scams. Wait, you have no idea. In fact, there's actually 6 ways to make money. Yeah, there are 6 ways to make money in the GPSC. In phase 1, there's actually more in later phases. But that is exactly the point. This is in fact a new invention. We are in fact evolving finance, not even just DeFi. We are involving economics and finance. That is an amazing meme, by the way. So, in February, I was talking about how aggressively the volume on PyreSwap could end up compounding itself. But in order for me to achieve that effect, or rather, in order for PyreSwap to achieve that effect, we needed a certain minimum threshold of people engaging in the unique utilities of PyreSwap in order to incentivize the volume of the DEX to compound into more volume. And believe it or not, the obvious solution became a Genesis event. So what we did was we basically shifted our priorities exactly, and we're like, okay, now that we've proven that what we've built works on a tokenomic level, we're now going to have to effectively tailor our message and tailor our outreach to the very person that we're trying to reach, the very person we're trying to save, which is arguably known as a degen. And it's kind of obvious looking back at it that, like, if you're trying to reach somebody, you have to call them. So we have effectively, overhauled the aesthetics of PyreSwap. We're going to actually overhaul the aesthetics of the GPSE products as well. And we've effectively began being more extroverted, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it. And I guess that's the story up until now. Okay, so for those of you guys in the audience, do you guys feel like I missed any part of that story? I would like to give more people credit, but I didn't want to name too many people. I also didn't want to really disparage anybody by name in this particular video. Well, anyways, if you're watching, PyreSwap's Genesis will be on the 15th of June, 2024. That's PyreSwap.com, PyreSwap.com. Thank you so much for watching this video.